Imran.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, Pierre-Yves. All right. Tory, the last time you and I sat down for an interview like this, I think we were at Central St. Martin's. So I think that was like over 10 years ago.
We're long overdue, Imran.
It's long overdue, and it's happening here in Dubai. And I want to talk in a minute about why you're both here, because there's lots to talk about there. But I want to start with the personal story that I started with, which is, it's unusual and potentially like really powerful to have a working and personal relationship like the two of you do. Can you share with us a little bit about the background of how you ended up working and being together in life and business?
Well, it's very exciting. We met through bankers. So, Pierre-Yves, you want to start, or do you want me to? So, it was, no, really, we met through bankers. We had a meeting for breakfast at the Ritz in Paris. And I think you had heard about our business. We had a great meeting. I think it lasted 2 hours. It was you and Tony. And they sent an email after the meeting, and I missed the email. So I did not email him back. I think you had an interest in investing in our business, and I missed the email. I didn't email him back.
Oh, really? So
No.
that was like a real...
It was a real meeting. And it was a real miss on my part. So, I had to, so I didn't email him for a year. And a year later, I had to email him because I was being sued by my ex-husband. I was, my board was, our entire company was, and he was deposing every single person we ever had a meeting with, a business meeting. So,
wow.
So I called Pierre-Yves, and you can take it. You can...
And then what happened from there, Pierre-Yves?
And from there, I was surprised that we had a great breakfast, and we were very interested. I mean, I was very impressed with Tory's success. I mean, what she had achieved back in 2012, so that was 8 years after you had launched the brand in 2004. And I thought that what she was doing and on multiple levels was very interesting. I mean, she was one of the very first to be on e-commerce. She created the first blog on fashion with the Tory Daily, you remember?
Of course.
And social media. I mean, there was so many things that was innovative in the way she was approaching fashion. And you've been in that industry for as long as I have been.
Yeah, we started around the same
back,
time.
A long time ago. And there's very few success of designers and founders that have reached a scale, even in the last 20 years. If you look in the last 20 years, probably less than, not even 5 brands that I can mention that have reached, significant scale.
Yeah.
So we were kind of fascinating with that. So we had those discussions, and we were interested in investing, in the brand and thinking about our investment. It took another turn because our relationship.
You took another kind of investment.
Exactly.
And here we are now.
What's it like working together as husband and wife?
I mean, first of all, it took me 4 years to convince him to come on board. This was not a given.
So you were married first.
Well, we were together for a long time.
Right.
So, and he was living in Paris, I was living in New York, and so it wasn't exactly, in the same country or so it took a while. I always admired Pierre-Yves, and obviously his CEO skills and his brand building and all the things that he's done at LVMH and McKinsey, but he has such an innate sense of understanding creatives, and I think that that's very unusual for a CEO to be thinking about that. So I thought, listen, if he ever would consider running our company, I said to our board, this would be an absolute gift to us. Like this is not exactly what Pierre-Yves was thinking would be his next phase in his career, but I think it's been incredible. I mean, we have very different styles, and we were talking to Patrick and Inji last night saying how, I'm a total entrepreneur, I think quickly, I go by instinct, and you're much more methodical, and I don't want to speak for you, but go ahead.
You know that book, Thinking Fast and Slow, by this Nobel Prize winner, which is called Daniel Kahneman, which, by the way, passed away not so long ago, and we actually had dinner with him like a year ago, and he wrote that book, which is called Thinking Fast and Slow, which, by the way, I highly recommend. It's a very interesting book. Troy thinks fast, I think slow. Like very methodical, and I think that's how we complement each other. But I really, love working. I mean, obviously, I think the brand is incredibly interesting. We do a lot of things. We have a size which allows us to do, interesting things. At the same time, we're not too big, so we can, be agile and still entrepreneurs. So we kind of in that sweet spot where we have scale, but still a lot of potential ahead of us. And working together has been, obviously a personal decision. I was not convinced in the first place.
So what convinced you?
Because, we started actually when, I was relocating to New York because we were getting married. And so I was thinking of what would be my next steps. And we actually worked on, we bought back one of our early investor in the brand. And I worked on that, transaction with Tory. And it was like, real work, on working with. It was the first time that we were, before it was like just giving advice or like changing or, and it felt very natural and very organic. And I started to spend time with the team and the culture. And at one point I say, honestly, she had to have someone coming on board because
you were the CEO, right?
I
CEO
was
and the creative,
CEO for 14 years, and I will say it was a big, and I have a great team, but not my skill set in retrospect. It was wonderful, and I loved building the business, but I really loved the creative process more, and it was pulling me in so many different directions. I used to spend maybe 20% of my time on the creative, and now it's 100%. So.
Yeah.
I hope you've seen a bit of a change.
The Toryssance, of course I have. That's what everyone in New York is talking about. That's a good segue to the state of American fashion.
Yep.
There's the kind of big picture of what's going on. And I think the fashion industry just generally is in a very unusual place right now. I mean, you've both been working in the industry for almost 20 years. I cannot recall a moment in fashion where things felt so blurry and so confused.
Globally,
Globally, particularly with big Western brands that have had a lot of success in the last 10 years. A lot of them, as I was saying here yesterday, a lot of them using kind of a formula that worked. You talked, Pierre-Yves, about Tory being one of the first designers to use social media and think about creating her own content, which was completely different for brands before. There's a very clear system. It was like a brand talks to a PR, the PR, helps to get stories placed, and it was all this like very linear process, right? The communication in the fashion world has completely changed since then. It's like a multifaceted, many-to-many conversation, right? And the last 10 years has been incredible as we've seen the way fashion engages with customers. But now it feels like the industry is maybe overexposed. There's too much content. Everybody's doing the same things. You look at ads or social media content, if you remove the little logo or don't look at which account it is, you don't even know which brand it's from. Like, what do you make of the state of fashion right now?
You go first.
No, I think there's so many things happening in the world, but I think it's probably we have to go back to a form of authenticity. If I were to try to describe what's probably, I think people probably feel that there's too much formula around. Everyone is doing pretty much the same thing. There's a lot of debate also around the value and pricing. A lot of change of designer, which is probably needed because you need creativity that goes from go from one brand to another. So I think what people people can see and read through everything. I mean, the customer are sophisticated. They see it a lot because everything is exposed, and I think they are really looking for authenticity. And we are very unique in a way. We were at Dubai Mall yesterday because we were reopening our store. And you walk in the Dubai Mall, which is probably the biggest mall in the world. I mean, 80 million people visiting this mall. It's incredible.
It's insane. And for so many brands, it's the number one store.
It's incredible.
Right.
But then you look at all those brands that were working in the mall. I mean, we're probably one of the very few, I don't know, maybe the only one, where we have a brand on a store, which is Tory's name. And she's still running the business and creating.
He's not replacing me yet.
And so, the authenticity of what we do and what we say, and we're going to talk about a lot of other things that Tory brought very early on, like the foundation and being a purpose-driven company, which a lot of brands now are bringing into, but it was really part of the brand in the first place. So, you know, a lot of the things that are the essence of and makes, I think, this brand unique and why it's resonating everywhere. Sometimes when people ask me, you know, describe what this brand is about, and I talked about, you know, authenticity and integrity. And authenticity is, I think, what people are going to be looking for more and more. And there's different, you know, answer for different brands out there. So I'm not going to speak for any of those brands out there. But, you know, authentic project, and that, you know, with a real, you know, connection, that are different. And you don't try to please every customer in the world. You know, that's not the point. You know, you attract the people that relate to who you are and what you stand for and what you propose. And I think that's the way I'm looking at it today.
Tory, what would you add to that?
I mean, I think I started with an idea that business and purpose could go hand in hand. And I think back then, 20 years ago, that was a very novel idea and one that was not very popular. So to have a North Star, and that is women for me. And it's women globally that have always been so inspiring. But we started with women entrepreneurs in the United States, and the company launched in 2004, and then the foundation in 2009. And it was really part of my business plan from day one, is how do we have a successful business with incredible products, but that actually has deeper meaning and will help support a foundation for women entrepreneurs. So that was sort of the framework. I think as we've gone, it's been such an incredible experience to have the women that we work with also weigh in and on our product, and it's been such a win for our employees. It's a win for our customer, and it's become this like incredible win-win across the board. And so I think if we could be role models for business to have purpose in a very authentic way, I'm very proud of that. I also think of just even the and culture. That's a big thing at our company. We spend a lot of time working on that. That's a differentiator. I don't know that, and I don't want to say American brands, I think all brands. Like, how do people feel when they work in your office? People are spending a tremendous amount of time at their workplace, and we want to have a workplace that celebrates different kinds of people, different thinking, diversity. It's all something that is super important to me and has been from day one, and that's something that will never change.
So I love that because, you know, at BOF, we talk a lot about purpose as well, like having a business grounded in a really clear mission that people can understand and get behind. Yesterday we were talking about how you take businesses like yours and you make them work in markets like these, right? And there's this kind of notion that in the past, the way most big international brands would operate in new markets is they'd have a template formula, and they'd come and they'd kind of plop that template in different markets. I'll never forget once I was in, I think it was Indonesia, and I was walking through one of the like fancy shopping malls, and it was literally 40 degrees outside, and the stores inside the mall had like winter clothes, you know? And that's like a very basic thing, but like I think, how do you think about taking your kind of global, it's not even your global, your authentic purpose, your vision, your kind of positioning of Tory Burch as a brand, and localizing that for different markets? Because you have stores in, you know, all over the world. Like how do you localize while keeping that same core Tory Burch essence?
Yeah, and I can speak just initially how we approached it from day one. And going into any market, we wanted to really learn the market, the local traditions, respect the cultures. And so that's something that's always been deeply important to me. So even our second store was in Japan. It was a very different culture, and 20 years ago, even more so. So I think, we have this foundation that is about what we are changing now, women's empowerment, we're changing the way we talk about that. Because women have the power. We're helping them realize their power. We're not bestowing
So what
anything.
changed?
Well, just the way we say women's empowerment. But that might not resonate in Japan the same way that it does. But what's another part of what we do is it's about involving men in our conversation, and that's a
You
big,
can't have women's empowerment
of course
without
not.
men.
And
yeah.
we need men to be our allies. We need men. And it seems what's so exciting to me being here is that you feel it. It's palpable. You feel the change. You feel the support. You feel how that's happening. And I think I said to a group of women, I always say this, I said, we can feel how we feel about women and women's equality or anything, and we're going to be talking to ourselves if we're sitting in a room talking to women. That's just not interesting, and it's not going to change, move the needle at all.
And then Pierre-Yves, in terms of like the more methodical business side of things, in terms of how you think about operating globally, but creating a local authenticity, how do you do that?
That's the thing we did. We obviously discussed a lot. I think what helped, as Tory mentioned, is that a lot of brands in the US, they expand in the US and they get big in the US before they go internationally, because the market is so big that you can have, whatever, 100 or 200 stores in the US before you bother going to Japan or the Middle East or wherever. But Tory made that decision very early on to, we've been in the Middle East since 2012, and the brand was created in 2004. So that's quite early in the development of the brand. And it really, I think, has helped really understanding and bringing into the way we're doing things, the global, culture and diversity of the world. Then obviously there's always something where, and we worked a lot with our local team and our philosophy is that you don't change the essence of who you are and the brands you are and what you stand for, but you translate it into the local culture, obviously the local language, but the local culture. So you don't change the essence of it or the meaning of it, because otherwise you become a different brands in different regions and different parts of the world, but you adjust for it. But it's a very interesting.
But how do you do that, right? Because I think one of the things I've seen is brands parachute an American or European executive into these regions, and like all the decision making is kind of this kind of conversation between the Western leader in New York or Paris or Milan, and then the kind of transplanted Westerner in the local market. How do you make it so that the people here have the power to have input into the decision making?
I mean, first here we work with the best partner that we can
that we could ever hope to have.
I mean, they build, as you know, luxury and fashion in this part of the world. So I mean, they have more insight than and anyone else in the industry, by the way, even and any partner in the world. So we listen to them and we work with them.
So a good local partner.
So when we have a partner which is in certain parts of the world, when we think it's we really need to work with someone, and it's really a partnership. When we operate directly, we work with people that really understand the culture. I mean, I'm not American, and I work in New York, and I'm French. So we have a lot of different culture and people that really. But what is interesting is that when you see a bestseller, for example, is usually a bestseller everywhere in the world when it comes to accessories in particular and footwear, which is sometimes intriguing. Because it's a, but then when you go to just the level underneath, which is not the top bestseller, but underneath, then you start seeing some differences by colors, by size. Obviously, we work a lot also on the fit. You talked about the seasonality, but the fit is very important because obviously we know that there's a lot of diversity.
So you're adapting shapes and silhouettes to different markets.
I mean, we do have different fits. It seems so superficial to hear, let's just transplant a Westerner into a market. And that's just the opposite of how we look at things. We have incredible teams that partner with the people on the ground. And also, I'm involved. I want to know.
Right.
Because I'm doing all the product. I mean, it's so exciting to see the opportunities here and meeting with customers yesterday, hearing from Shaloub, our team, but also having a great team that has that intellectual curiosity that is critical to really not make it superficial and make it very meaningful.
Yeah. Okay. The kind of elephant in the room in fashion right now is around this announcement around tariffs, which has really thrown the whole fashion world into a complete state of uncertainty and shock. I think people were still reeling about it. I mean, Tory, you and your business, you started a made in China thing early on in your, it was part of the strategy, right? It was about how to get like really good quality merchandise delivered at a value, because part of what the value proposition of Tory Burch has always been that it's not necessarily like, you know, these insane prices of some of the luxury brands. Pierre, from a operational perspective, like how are you, I'm so interested to get into your mind around this, because how are you thinking about how a company should navigate this right now? When there's so much uncertainty, you don't know what's going to happen, you know, potentially your sourcing strategies all need to change. You know, someone on our team, Rowan, was talking to me about Dubai potentially being an interesting like hub where people could ship stuff, because apparently tariffs only apply based on like where the product is coming from. So like we might see the rise of these other hubs that, you know, what is the operational supply chain side of your brain thinking about in terms of how to navigate this uncertainty?
Yeah. Well, first, it's hard to comment on the because it's changing every half an hour. So there's not much that we can comment on this. But I would just, you know, you said, you know, the initial strategy of Tory was not. I mean, you've mentioned made in China. It was not that. You know, and by the way, the made in China for us is a very, very, very.
Is it small now?
It's less than 6%.
It's really about finding.
So where is it made now?
So it's in a lot of different places in
Okay.
the world. Because the way we're looking at it is to get the best craft that we want.
Yeah.
Craft, and also the ability to embrace the innovation that, you know, Tory has been bringing, having agility also in the way we work. In different places in the world. And, you know, there's a lot of very interesting, and we work in Brazil, for example, in India,
Yeah.
in different places in Europe.
Eastern Europe and Turkey.
So we have a global sourcing that really is specific to where we find the right skill set for the type of product that we do. We do multiple categories because we have handbags, we have footwear, we have jewelry, we have ready-to-wear, we have a home
Right.
collection. And even when you take footwear, there's a lot of different types of footwear, you know, between the sneakers
Right.
and the sandal and the high heel. So you don't find the skills to be able to source that in just one place. So our strategy is really, you know, finding all those global sourcing. The only thing that I can say is that this takes years to build. And when you manage a business, you cannot change it like, you know, every other day or even every 6 months. It takes years to build the proper sourcing and the partnership with, you know, suppliers that really understand and work with you. And obviously you evolve it as you go, you know, but you cannot change it overnight.
So, yeah, I mean, and that's clear. And so leaving aside China for a minute, if you have sourcing in all of these different countries. I mean, everybody saw the list of countries, and it's on pause for 90 days, and who knows what's going to happen. Like, how are you thinking about that in terms of? I know you can't make a prediction, but you know, what do you advise people to do in terms of like if you can't change your sourcing overnight, if it's something that takes a long time to build, what do you do? Do you manage it from like absorbing some of the increased costs from the tariffs in your margin? Do you pass it on to customers? Like, how do you get through that?
I'm not advising any longer. I used to advise people when I was at McKinsey. Now I'm
Okay.
advising anymore. So we're really focusing on our business, and we'll see. You know,
I mean,
and
also-
depending on what will happen, we'll do whatever we feel is the right thing. The product is critical for us, so we don't want to compromise in any way on the quality of the product, and then we'll deal with it. I mean, we have not much that we can do. You know, politicians would decide whatever they do. We'll see when things would be real. In the meantime, you know, we're not going to go left and right depending on the announcement of the day.
Okay. We're running out of time.
Try to be a bit blunt.
Pardon?
Try to be a bit blunt on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I understand. It's just so complicated at the moment navigating a situation like this, because, you know, even for our team, you know, they're like, do we have to change the story we just wrote an hour ago? Because
I do feel grace under pressure is very important right now. And I think being an entrepreneur, you have things, I mean, obviously this is unique and different, but you have things coming at you all the time. And so you have to be calm, you have to not overreact, overcorrect, because it's an iterative process that's happening. And we just don't, no one knows. I don't even think people in the very close circles know.
Yeah.
We had COVID. We had, 350 stores closed for 3 months.
With
As
no
a private
visibility
as a
when our
private
stores would
company,
open.
I can tell you, it's just a bit. You just continue to, and then the crisis is going to be over at one point.
You do what you can do.
Yeah, this feels like it might be a 4-year crisis, though, and there's no vaccine that's going to get us out of it. As you think about, if you look, we were looking at some growth stats yesterday around what's happening in the, in Western Europe, what's happening in China, what's happening in the U.S., which we just discussed. What does that do for the way the two of you think about where you look for growth as a company? Like, where are you focused? You're obviously here in Dubai. You haven't been here for a while. Like, what are you thinking about? And that, I know you planned this trip before
I'll
then.
start with this, Imran, because I've always wanted to be the most exceptional company, not necessarily the biggest company. So for me, looking at the idea of rethinking a company, transforming it, that's something that's been happening over the last 5 years. I think we've done a pretty good job of doing that carefully, where we haven't just become someone different and we haven't alienated our core customers. But it's, I like to think of it as refining what we do and keep building on that. And so I know that you have probably a different answer on that, but we talk about it all the time. I don't want to have growth for growth's sake. I want it to be meaningful and have a long-term perspective on the health of the business.
Pierre?
We're a private company. Tory, control the company, so we can really decide the pace at which we grow. The company was profitable in year 2, and it's been since then, self-financing its own development. So we found our own development, so we don't have to rely on, any other source of, funding, and we can really decide the pace at which we grow. And I think this has been very important in a lot of decisions that Tory has taken over the years in terms of distribution. For example, the store size, the number of stores. It's really being a curated development, but we have tremendous opportunities because it's even in the U.S. The U.S. is a big market for us, but it's a gigantic market. We have a lot of growth. I mean, this region is very exciting. We just, as I mentioned, we just reopened our Dubai Mall store, which is a store that we had, but we brought our new concept, which is a concept that Tory has been working in during COVID, and that we came up in 21.
I think that's the one I went to visit in New York, because you told me to go visit it, right?
Which we've continued to evolve.
Yeah.
We just opened LA, which is a bit different.
We just opened, in the last 2 weeks, we've opened LA on Rodeo Drive, which is a store that we had, we've been redoing it, and we opened Shanghai in Kerry Center, which is a store that we had, that we've been redoing after 10 years. So, it's not about opening a lot of stores, it's also taking the store that we have that are great, and one of the best location, and after 10 years, or 8 years or 6 years, you need to bring, new and freshness as part of the evolution of the brand. So it's really, having, it's more about, being focused and really going after things that we really want, because the opportunities are tremendous. I mean, we can do, so many things in all the categories that we have. There's, potential to grow in all those countries. If you just look in the because here we're talking about the South,
the global South.
It's the development that we have, obviously, here in the Middle East, but also we're opening a third store in India, in Bangalore, in 3 months. We already have 2 stores there. But there are countries like Indonesia. We have 8 stores in Indonesia. Incredible, countries. 300 million people, a very big, up and coming middle class that is discovering, luxury. And we're an incredible brand for them, because they're really discovering luxury with us. We are selling actually our bags, for example, in Indonesia at a very high price, in our pricing architecture. But they're not going to buy, a bag at $10,000.
Yeah.
So we're offering a great, an incredible value for those customers. But we see that in Thailand. We see that in a lot of those countries where And the same obviously in the US. And so we are in that very sweet spot, obviously, of being very unique as a brand, and we started with that, with the purpose, the aesthetic, Tory being at the helm of the brand, but also, we talked a bit about the pricing, the value that we're offering to the customer is incredible. And we see a lot of customers that are trading up, for a brand that they feel is not as qualitative, don't offer, as much innovation. So we're getting customers that are elevating, but we're also getting a lot of customers that were kind of in and out in buying high-end luxury. And they feel now, when the sneakers were at 700 was fine. When it's 1,300, it's a different story. And when the bag is at, 5,000.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to me like this is a really great moment for brands like Tory Burch, because there's such a broken sense of the value proposition with customers. Like, they just look at those prices and it doesn't make sense, I could talk to you guys forever. We're already 5 minutes over, but I do want to ask each of you for, I know you don't advise people, but maybe you could give some advice, which is, there's a lot of business builders here, right? Entrepreneurs who are at the early stage of their journeys and trying to build their own businesses. What's one piece of advice you have? I'll start with you, Pierre-Yves. What's one piece of advice for someone building something new? How do you create something with longevity and authenticity?
I mean, I just have to look at Tory. I'm not an entrepreneur. I mean, I've managed big businesses, but now I'm partnering, with Tory. I think you always look at the positives, and you always look at the glass half full. And as an entrepreneur, you have to look at the opportunity, and you have to have an incredible drive. And when I see Tory, she's always positive. She always see the opportunity, and she has a drive through, ups and downs.
Yeah.
And obviously, you have to have the vision. You have to have all these other things. But I think the personality and the character is what makes a huge difference. Yeah. And so I just have to look at her, and then I see, what.
That's a really good answer, Tory.
I would just say, don't let people put you in a box, because I think that there's the tendency to do that. People like to label you, put you in a certain place, and I think write your own story.
Okay. I am so grateful to both of you for joining us at BoF CROSSROADS. Enjoy the rest of your time in the region. I'm sure it's going to be really
I'll just say also, being in this region was so inspiring, and really talking to people. I've never been to a place where more people absolutely love living here, like authentically through and through. It's really wonderful to see.
Yeah, it's kind of infectious too.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.